Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Yelders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Buenas, this is Francisco Gallardo with the Healing Generations podcast, Yelder edition, brought to you by the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Yelders. Want to say what's up, my gente? I'm so glad to be back. We have a special guest today. All my guests are special, but I think she's extra special. But before we get into that, I want to say what's up to Michelle. I'm Michelle.
Hey, everyone.
So we're back again. I'm going to go ahead and like I say every episode, we always want to make sure we take time to recognize, the four cardinal directions. We want to ask permission from our ancestors. And what I mean by permission is not if it's okay if we could do it. We want to do it in concert with them. We want to do it with them. We want to invite them to be with us in that way. That's what I mean by getting permission from them to be here and to share some beautiful words together and talk about this process of healing. So I want you to close your eyes if you can. If you're driving, please don't do that. But if you can, close your eyes. I want you to take a deep breath. Thinking of that east direction, we want to think about all the men in our lives. Our grandfathers, our fathers, our sons, our tios, even our hood tios. We want to remember them. We want to remember our brothers, even our homies, our coworkers, all the men in our lives, our mentors, all the ones that help guided us and help build with us in a good way. We want to remember all them and bring that energy here. But we also recognize the men in our life also share pain. They share anxiety. They share depression, other things that they're fighting. A lot of times men deal with this in silence. They don't talk about it. So I want to bring all that here so that we can talk about it. And then as we make our way to the left, we think of all our LGBTQ plus relatives in between and the things that they're dealing with. The attacks on what's going on with them. But we want to celebrate the beauty that they bring to our communities, the blessing. And we want to recognize their sacredness and the blessing that they are and all that they are. And as we face that west direction, we think about all the women in our lives. From our grandmothers, to our mothers, to our tias, to our daughters, to our sisters. We want to recognize those, even those hood tias and hood moms, things that they go through, the good and the bad. We want to honor their blessing, the nurturing ways, and those that struggle to be nurturing. We want to recognize women in all their states and make sure their voice is heard in a good way and lift them up in that way. And to our young daughters and all the way down, we want to think about them too. And then we turn again to our left and we face that north direction. And then when we're facing that north direction, we're thinking about all our ancestors, those that came before us, those that we didn't even know their name. Or they didn't even know our name, but they still prayed for us. They still wondered about how they could make the world better for us. Make sure we have clean water, food, education, all those types of things. We want to recognize our ancestors in that way. We want to recognize our elders too, that our elders are struggling in a lot of ways right now. Things are very expensive. Healthcare is very expensive. And we want our elders to be good. And I want to remind you, if you have a grandma and grandpa or maybe an older uncle, mom and dad, call them, check up on them. Maybe take them some food, Listen to their stories, no matter how many times you heard it. I want you to think about that. And then we turn again to our left and we face this south direction. And in the south direction, we think of all the children, even those little babies that are not even born yet. They're coming, those newborns. What's life going to be like for them? What are we doing to ensure that they have a better life? We want to think about those newborns to the toddlers, to elementary school, to middle school, to high school, and beyond. We want to think about them in a good way. We want them to have all the hopes and dreams, to make things better, not just for us, our particular, ethnic group or people, but we're talking about everybody. Because the more people feel good about themselves and other people feel good, they tend not to hurt people, and that's what we want. And we want to touch Mother Earth, and we want to think about her and her beauty, and think about the need that we have to do to protect her. We have to think about what we need to do. Not just say, hey, think about Mother Earth, but what are you doing? How are you lessening your impact on Mother Earth? What are you doing to protect her? Doing what you can. And then also we put our hands up to the sky and we think of that sun and all the beauty that the sun gives us. Because with the love of the sun, that's how we grow the crops, right? And that's how the animals eat. That whole ecosystem we depend on tremendously. We want to honor the sun in that way. And that also represents hope for our people. That this sun comes up every day, even if we can't see it, it's there. And we want that to be the hope in your life, the everyday hope. And then in the center, I'm not telling you what to believe, but what I'm telling you is let's honor creation, life itself. What a gift it is to be alive, no matter what your state. Even if you're having a hard time or you're having, this is a prime time of your life, that this life, what we feel, how important it is and how we cherish it and don't take it for granted. And we all do at times, but every once in a while we need to slow down and think about what's important. Not only important for us, but what's best for our community in that way. So I want you to take a deep breath again. Oh, good, relatives. Thank you for taking that time out, just for a few minutes so we can, share some beautiful intentions with our listeners and with our relatives. You know what I mean? That always centers me in a good way. But today going back to the show, we have this very important agency that is based in Oakland. And one of my bros, George Gavisi, I've known him for many years, and it's beautiful to see what him and his community built. It's not just him, it's all those that work there. So Frankie, if you can share a little bit about who you are, your people, your roots, your path that brought you where you are today. Just in a snapshot. And as we go down the line here, we'll learn more about you.
Okay, sounds good. So again, my name is Frankie Free Ramos. I'll start in 1974, the year that I was born. I was born in Ponce, Puerto Rico. My parents, though, were living in Jauco at the time, and that's where I spent my first few years with my father's parents, Mama Luz and Papa Chin, who raised me for a lot of my early years. I lived in Puerto Rico for the first 5 years of my life, and they were a mix of wonderful. My grandparents doted on me. My mother doted on me. My father did as well. My father had lost his first love to an overdose, his puppy love, his teen love, who also gave birth to my father's first daughter. And so that set him on a really heartbreaking path. And he didn't always know how to love, but he loved me a lot. But he was not good to my mother. And so I grew up with a lot of love directed at me and a lot of violence directed at my mom. And 3 years after I was born, my little brother was born. And there was just, ever since, he was in the womb, a lot of violence and pain in my family. And my mother eventually left my father a couple years later. I was probably about 7, and that started us moving back and forth between the island and first New York and then San Diego. So I was at the time, it was hard to be a young person moving around so much, but by the time I was in high school, I could definitely see that it was also a privilege, and I learned a lot from living in all these different places. But I would always go back to Puerto Rico, whether it was just for the summer or when things got hard for my mom as a single mom. She would sometimes move us back to Puerto Rico, and my home base in Puerto Rico was always my home in Jauco with my grandparents. And yeah, Jauco's a beautiful country town in Pueblo del Café. My mother's family is from San Sebastian, even more beautiful and lush, mountainous, rainy town. And so, yeah, I think that that connection to nature, to my homeland, to my culture, to my abuelos and bisabuelos, I'm really lucky to have had that, along my whole life really. And I think it, just instilled in me, gave me a lot of inner strength and rootedness, even though a lot of my early life was, a lot of bouncing around and a lot of chaos. And I was really fortunate to decide to study at UC Berkeley, which is how I first came into to know George Galvis, who you mentioned. And we became close friends. We were both, student activists for the liberation of our people. We also had a particular dedication to our incarcerated relatives and justice for incarcerated people. So throughout the years, George was a close friend, one of the only people who really understood what I was going through, having my brother in and out of the system from the time he was 14 years old, and was always a constant source of support. So I was really fortunate when I finished my PhD to apply and get this job at Courage as director of campaigns and organizing. So now my life's passion for justice and for teaching and for liberation is also what I get to do for work. And I'm having a great time. I'm about to celebrate 5 years in this role at Courage, and just, really thankful every single day.
Thank you, Frankie, for sharing all of that. I feel like I've only gotten to know a little bit more about like your recent portion of your life working at Courage, but I really enjoyed hearing about the earlier years of you growing up in the island with your grandparents and your bisabuelos. It really took me back to, I was born and raised here in East LA, but I see that I grew up, part of my upbringing and growing up was back in the motherland in my parents' hometown, in the little pueblito. And it was at my grandparents' house. And so I'm still fortunate to have that connection with my living grandmother. But I also was really fortunate to grow up with great grandparents. And just like you mentioned, right, that gives you a different sense of certainty in who you are, in groundedness and rootedness. And so I really resonated with when you were sharing that, which brings me to the next question that we have of what teachings or traditions from your cultura, from your family, or even your lived experience have guided you throughout your healing journey?
I would say a big part, even though it wasn't always explicit teaching until I was older and explicitly asked my grandfather about what he was working on in the land, but it was just always around me, just being one with the land, cultivating things. My grandmother loved her roses. She loved all her million plantitas. And my grandfather was the one that really tended to the fruits and vegetables and roots that we grew on the land. And I think that just, instilled in me, taught me how much peace there is. Even though as a kid, it's also really scary because dang, there's so many bugs, scary centipedes and,
Yeah.
don't be out when the sun is going down because the mosquitoes and the mimes would bite the heck out of you. So it wasn't only a love story, but there was a lot of respect, a little bit of fear, but just such a peacefulness and a slowness and a connectedness that in the years that I grew up in the cities of San Diego or New York or even in the Bay Area, you don't always have that at your fingertips, but
Mm-hmm.
I
Hmm.
knew to search out for it. Before, I was conscious of an idea around healing. I just kind of intuitively knew that I felt better, that it was magical to go to the redwoods in the Oakland Hills where I spend a lot of time. Um, I was fortunate in Puerto Rico, and a lot of my early years also through high school was in San Diego. So both of them, beaches, the ocean was something that was very, very present. And where we would go to celebrate and where we would go to refresh. And without having a name to it, or like a necessarily like a certain intentionality around it. There was just this calling to always go to the ocean and a recognition that hearing those waves and in Northern California, I don't dare swim in this ocean. It's very rare that I go all the way in, but that's okay. Even just dipping my feet and walking in the little shallow part, letting that ocean water touch me and contemplating on the vastness of the ocean and the power of the ocean has always been an important part of my healing, even though it wasn't an explicit, teaching. And then another thing that I think I give a lot of credit to, and it's something I get to um really appreciate every time I talk to my brother. So my brother is now 47, maybe 48 years old. He's in jail. He's been in and out, like I said, from the time he was 14. And he really battles with a terrible addiction to meth that just makes it, really hard for him to stay out of prison and jail. But he has such a beautiful disposition towards life. He is so immensely grateful, always hopeful. He just has this beautiful, tender heart and love of life and considers himself very fortunate, very blessed. And for me, I'm like, it's so sad the trajectory that his life has taken, but I recognize that he gets that. We both get that from our father and our mother. Both of our
Mm-hmm.
parents have this just like joy around life and this like constant like the cup is half full kind of attitude and life is a party. And
Mhm.
my dad died early. My dad died at 50 years old, but all of his siblings who were really close to him, we always talked about like he lived life on his terms, vivió la vida a su manera, and like that we couldn't be sad because he lived those 50 years really, really hard, really to the fullest. And my mom's kind of the same way. She doesn't go as hard, but she loves life. She loves to celebrate. Growing up, she always made a big deal of birthdays and Easter and Christmas. And I think that's been a really powerful teaching in my life, just to
Mm.
have that attitude
Mm-hmm.
of like, no matter what's going on, life is good and we are blessed and life is what you make it. And if you have a good attitude, it's going to be a good day, even if you're incarcerated, even if you're homeless. And I haven't experienced those things, but that's what my brother reflects to me. And I recognize it in the way that we were raised from our parents and
Mm.
probably in our
Mm.
DNA.
Mhm.
Well, I really appreciate, you talking about that resilience, because a lot of times it's hard to put a finger on exactly what resilience is. It's finding something that you found that comfort in and and giving you that hope, especially when times are hard, when times are tough. So how do you carry these teachings today forward? How do you pass them on to your kids, either, through your own walks of life or even the people you support at Courage? Like what is those teachings that you like to, that you hold dear, that you present to them, that they have that aha moment? You know what I mean? Because to me, working with people, when they have that aha moment, I see their eyes kind of just get a little brighter. I know that for themselves, they're getting it. It doesn't matter how much I get it for them. It matters what they're doing.
I think it's important to have a mix. We all learn in different ways. We need to hear things sometimes in lots of different modalities. I know that as being an educator. And also there's it's something that's beautiful about humans and something that is also, I think, kind of a weakness, which is that the negative messages are sometimes easier to accept and resonate than like the positive messages. And like for some reason, like the positive messages, like we constantly, even if we know them, we constantly need to be reminded of them. We need to practice them, right? It's like our default isn't healing for some reason, and it makes sense because of the society that we live in is actually so toxic, and so it makes it so hard for us to just be joyful and living in gratitude every single day. We have to work hard. We have lots of reasons to be worried about, whether it's like bills or just, day-to-day life, or like big global stuff like what's happening to Mother Earth or what we're doing to our relatives in other places. But I say all that to say that I think there's lots of different ways that I try to pass that on. I think the most important is modeling it. They say people won't remember necessarily what you say or do, but how you make them feel. So I think it's really important, and I try to be really intentional to like just love on the people that I'm with. And like I'm always like smiling, and I try to, you mostly will see me, in a good mood, happy, talking about, and whenever it's on me to have a check-in question, the check-in question is always something either silly or about joy or gratitude. So I try to make it so like the people that I work with and I'm in contact with and my own children, being around me is an opportunity and invitation to like think about gratitude, to think about joy, to laugh, to smile, to notice how pretty the sky is today, or stop and smell the roses. But I also think that it is important to give name to things and to verbalize them. So I try to also do that and try to, create opportunities, and let's talk about like how you're feeling and what's kind of a thorn in your side right now, and on the flip side, what's kind of a rose and what's kind of something you're looking forward to, and are you taking the time to take care of yourself, and how are you feeling about the balance of your life right now? Especially I work with a lot of folks at Courage in my daily. I am also a teacher of an undergrad course. And so I work with a lot of people who are at a stage of life that things are a little bit more chaotic. Like they might not be in a stable relationship like I am. They might not be in a more or less stable housing situation like I am. And it is, I think, particularly hard at those stages of life to have a balance, to really be taking good care of yourself with like your sleep and water and eating the basic things. So I try to always name those things, check in around those things, have people and ask people to reflect on those, and also share my own struggles, even with having all the relative stability that I have at this stage of my life. It doesn't mean that I don't worry about finances, that I don't get demoralized, that I don't have hard days, that I don't fall off on going to the gym and have a hard
Mm-hmm.
time, being disciplined with the
Yeah.
things that I know I need to do, like eating my veggies. But just like be constantly talking about that as much, if not more, as like the work that we're doing that's for others. We're just really prioritizing and taking the time and space to talk about how we're doing and what kind of, what am I feeling and what am I feeling like I might want to do differently. Because one of my professors taught me something was such a small thing, but it was so powerful. She said, balance is not a place that we arrive. Balance is a constant struggle. And I was like, oh, that's such an important reframing, because I think so many of us, we're always searching for balance. And there are times when we might feel like we're approaching a good balance, and then there's times when we know that like we're way off. And I think we can, kind of be hard on ourselves for that. Like that sense of like not being able to achieve balance in itself gives us some kind of, anxiety or maybe even shame. Like, why am I not doing better? I know better. But, it's really hard. It's a constant struggle. And it's something that we can always be on a daily, weekly basis, like fine tuning. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, maybe last week was a particularly busy week where I didn't get to take walks and work out. That's okay. This week, let me see if I can build that in a little bit more.
Yeah, I really enjoy what you said about, I mean, first of all, pain to me feels very easy, right? It's just easy to deal with pain. It just comes your way. And even though it's ugly and it feels some way, emotional pain, it's there. And it's harder to make that push to feel good, to have that balance, as you talked about it. It reminds me of watching people on those big, high tension, things are walking on this big high rope, and they have this big pole and they're trying to balance everything on it. And whoa, they almost slip. And then they know they catch themselves. Sometimes in life, I feel that way, and the difference is, instead of talking to yourself like, oh, I don't deserve, I should fall because I can't do this. It's that resiliency to say, no, I just gotta keep trying. I gotta work what I know, and then I'm gonna achieve it. And I feel like, you put that in a beautiful way, because there's so many people who give up, not because they're weak or anything. They just give up because it's hard for them to see the beauty, to see the good. And I think one of the things that I had to do, I don't know, Michelle, if this is something you ever thought of, but it's one of those things where I had to think in my mind, how can I just take a small step and see where it goes? Maybe I don't have all the answers right now, but just take a little small step. And then pretty soon I would feel like, well, if I give up right now, not only am I letting myself down, I'm letting people around me down. And that always gave me a little bit motivation. You know what I mean? I think it sometimes that's a little difficult, but that's what I did to cope. And how did you handle that at times, Michelle?
I think what I've learned now as an adult is, and it's a reminder, like Frankie said, that I sometimes need to grasp on when people may mention it, is that I need to give myself some grace. I need to be gentle with myself. And like Frankie said, checking in with yourself is super, super important. And sometimes, like the way that I see it being modeled now with like today's parents is that they teach their kids like affirmations, right? Like speaking very kind to yourself, looking at yourself in the mirror. Some people write down those gentle reminders in the mirror. I've seen some friends that sometimes they hang it in their ceiling so that when they wake up, it's the first thing that they see. And so I feel like I've been learning how to do that now as an adult. And I think many of my peers have also been learning how to implement that for ourselves. And it's something that is being modeled to like the next generations on how to be more kind to ourselves and how to be intentional about those reminders to ourselves. And speaking of reminders, it also took me back to, it's something that many of the trainers here at NCN say when we go do trainings, that we may not be here to teach you something new, but we're here to remind you. And that's sometimes what we need as part of our healing, right? Like someone there to give us those reminders, either in the things that they say or in how they walk, right? And so I love that you mentioned that. I think it's also very crucial when you're working with youth and as an educator to do that, to be very deliberate and intentional about that. Frankie, what have you discovered about yourself through your healing process that you didn't realize before?
Something that I recently learned that I thought was profound. I used to kind of worry about myself and my mental health when I know so many people who do therapy and like really talk about how much they benefit from it. And I've always checked in with myself because I have never felt the need for therapy until something really recently was a turning point. But I was worried about myself. I was worried that something was wrong because of how resilient I feel and because I didn't feel like I needed therapy, even though I knew I had been through X, Y, and Z. And I recently learned that that's okay, that there are some people for different reasons. It might be biology, DNA, it might be who knows? I don't really know what it is, but the fact that I am mostly okay with some really terrible things that I have experienced doesn't mean that actually something is wrong with me because I don't feel more broken. And that was really powerful. And the thing that finally I did go to therapy for, and it actually was really helpful, is I think the hardest thing I've had to deal with in my life, and the thing that worried me because I could talk about it with a level of like apparently okayness. And I was just like, am I actually okay? Am I really suppressing some deep, deep hurt? Is my father passed away on my 27th birthday. And my father and I were really close, even though he battled with addiction and didn't really raise me. And like I mentioned, was very abusive towards my mother and my brother. He always showed me a lot of love, and I just always had a lot of love for him. But there was an incident where I got really, really mad at him. He really ticked me off because he was in a desperate situation and he was desperate to get a hold of me. And so he was going through his mother, my grandmother who raised me. And so by the time I talked to my grandmother, she was really like, oh my God, can you call your father? He's got me stressed out. So when I finally got a hold of him, I told him off because you don't mess with my mama Luz. You know what I mean? How dare you stress out mama Luz? And I said some horrible things. And it was just, and that was the last time I talked to him. That was in the fall. I immediately regretted it. And I was like, I got to talk to my father and tell him, of course I didn't mean those things. I even said, don't call me anymore. And I was like, I was working full time. I was going to school. And I was like, when I'm done with this semester, I'm going to call him. And my last final was December 8th, my birthday. And I was hecka thinking about him. And I get a call on the morning of my birthday from my tia thinking she's wishing me happy birthday. And she told me he passed away. And I can tell that story, even though it brings me great pain. And I still cry a lot on my birthday thinking about, how terrible I was to him and what a terrible thing to lose him in that way. And then on my birthday, it like definitely felt like a punishment from the universe. Like I take it very personal, like, why did it have to go down like that? And I finally did get therapy around it, and it was really helpful, this technique that some therapists use now. But in all of that, even after the therapy, yeah, I just learned that there isn't something wrong with me because I can tell you that story and I'm not a terrible mess about it, even though it is a very painful story and I still carry a lot of pain with it. And the therapy did help me like not blame myself and not feel like I was punished for it. But it is still a very terrible, terrible experience. But my ability to just kind of be okay and not dwell so much on the past and cry certain times of the year when I think of him, but not be so destroyed by it. I thought maybe something's wrong with me. And now I know that there are people who just deal with trauma in different ways. And there are people like me who deal with it in a way that, just doesn't look like other people's. I don't really know how to explain it, but that was a learning and an acceptance that I think has been very valuable, because for a while I was worried. What does this say about me?
Yeah, that's a lot. But despite all that, you're still resilient. Look at you. You know what I'm saying? Look at all the stuff you're doing, and I see you over there over there at Courage and thing. I know I only see you when we do trainings and stuff, but even then, I get a sense of who you are, and I could tell it's that part of you is very powerful. And in order to look back and deal with some of that trauma is difficult. You know what I mean? I can relate. My dad passed away on my 21st birthday due to alcoholism. I always struggle with that because I thought, why did he choose that over me? Why didn't he do this? Why wasn't I good enough, or my sisters? Or, it's hard when you're a kid just trying to figure life out, even as an adult. You know what I mean? It is that difficult part of change. But I have a question. It's not on our list, but it's a question I like to ask. Is what about healing that surprise? Because most people have an idea about what healing is, but what's something that is unexpected when healing is happening, or it's already happened? Like sometimes it's just something changes subtly, but it changes your perspective. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, I think when I started to meditate, and I'm not like in the regular practice of meditation, but there was a time I had heard a story about the physical healing power of meditation. And I was like, man, that sounds powerful. Let me finally try it. And I was on it for a little while. And I was amazed at how, like, a little bit of healing goes a long way. How a little bit, like, let's say it was, a couple months of like a pretty regular meditation practice, how meditating itself got easier and easier, and how I needed to meditate for less time
Mm.
for it to have an impact on my daily life. And to this day, that when I started meditating, and that those months that I'm talking about are easily, I don't know, maybe some 8 years ago. But to this day, I can tap into that feeling pretty easily. I can, in that self-awareness, like if I'm feeling rushed or I'm feeling grumpy, the way that I can now be like, oh, I'm rushing, and I really don't need to be rushing. Let me get into flow state. I'm one with time. Or like, oh, I'm grumpy. Why am I grumpy? What do I know makes me
Mm.
feel better when I'm grumpy? Maybe I should snack on something, or maybe I should go outside for a little bit. That is the lasting benefit of having done that meditation practice all those years
Mm.
ago. So that's something that surprised me and that I think is really instructive and powerful.
Yes, it is. Having that self-awareness to, check in the moment. Wait, I need to slow down, and being intentional about I need to do this in order to help me slow down. That takes a lot of practice for sure. And it's not easy to develop that skill.
Yeah. And, with meditation, they teach you to do that without judgment, which is where there's a lot of power. Like, no judgment that, Frankie's feeling, really hangry right now. Aren't I funny? I'm a trip when I'm hungry, let's fix that. That's powerful.
Yes, it is. Another question that we like to ask, that I guess flows with this conversation right here, right now, is that if you could speak to someone who was just starting on their healing journey, what words would you want them to hear from your heart?
That everything is harder if you do it by yourself. Ask for help. Try to identify somebody in your life that you trust, to let them know that you're on this journey, that you have these goals for yourself, and ask for their support, because there are times when we'll just get caught up in life and we'll forget. And like I said earlier, right? Like, the negative is easier to remember. So you might have come to a place where you believe in your own sacredness. You believe in your own power. You know to give grace to yourself and love yourself and take care of yourself. And yet, that could be overshadowed by somebody being mean to you or something hard that's happening, and you can get down and out. And it's so helpful to have another human being to be able to reflect back to you what you already know and what you shared was your goal, and to be your cheerleader. I mean, I think I've heard of people who've had some amazing transformations, and they say the way they tell their story, it sounds like they did it by themselves. I'm always curious, like, who was actually in your corner? Because I think usually you had help. I know I've had a lot of help. I know I can tell you some people who have been my cheerleaders, my solid friends who have reminded me, even my children, you know, are beautiful mirrors and reminders and cheerleaders, when I'm feeling down and out, or I'm speaking negatively, or I'm just acting in a way that's out of sorts. My children at times have been the ones to remind me to check in on me or to check me, and that's really valuable. So if you have any goal for yourself, it's actually super, super helpful. I mean, at minimum, also, if you don't feel like you have that trusted person, there's so much value in speaking it out loud, in writing it down, in putting it in front of you. I'm a big fan of vision boards. I have my 3 last vision boards where I can see them all the time. So yeah, just speaking it, writing it, having what it is you hope to do always in your face. But I think one of the most powerful is if it's another human being who can just remind you and cheerlead for you.
Yeah, we all need that, Definitely we all need that. But it kind of takes us to, like, how has your healing changed the way you show up for your family, for your kids, for people, your friends? I mean, has it impacted the way you help them, address them, communicate with them?
Yeah, I mean, I've been surprised when my husband reflects to me feeling lonely, and his request to me has been, apparently I get defensive. I didn't know that. I'm like, what? I'm the least self-defensive person you know. Well, not if you hear him tell it.
Yeah.
But he's been asking me to listen with my heart. And that's something that I know that he's needed in his healing journey. And him reflecting that to me has been able to help me reflect on and try to unpack why do I make him feel like I'm not listening with my heart? And that's like the latest big thing that I've been learning and practicing. And with him and with my children, I really try to just listen with my heart, like not feel like I need to jump in with questions or with my opinion about, like, why did you do it that way or whatever, but just be a sounding board. And it's not easy because, sometimes my husband might tell me things that are about me that are hard to hear. My children mostly, it's mostly hard for me when they tell me things that it's not about me, but it's hard for me to hear that they're experiencing that. And I want to, say a lot of things, in the form of advice, but try to really lean into just listening with my heart, because a lot of times people, it's just so helpful for them to be able to say it all to somebody that they trust, and they don't need necessarily any answers from me. They just need that time. And in the talking, and the less I talk and the more I listen, the more it gives them space to say it all, get it all out. And a lot of times at the end of it will be their own ideas about what they want to do or need to do. Their own answers are there, and it's more powerful than if I had said it. So Yeah, I think that's kind of like the newest learning and thing that I'm practicing.
Well, I appreciate that because sometimes I jump the gun. You know, I feel defensive because it's a compounding thing. You know what I mean? When you've been traumatized several different times, there's just a time where you're like, nah, I'm not doing that. But it's not in the right situation. You know what I mean? And you might be hurting somebody that really did. They're not the cause of that trauma. So we have to be careful with that, and just acknowledging that is a good thing, especially in relationships. You know what I mean? That same speech that your husband told you. I mean, sometimes me and my wife tell that to each other. You know what I mean? But it's part about communication and learning how to listen for what they need, not what we think they need. And it's difficult, but I appreciate your kind of awareness of that, because to
Hmm.
me, that's a big deal. Um, Man, I feel like we could talk about this forever. I want to switch slightly to the kind of work that you're doing and the healing that happens there. So if you could tell us a little bit about kind of the mission of what you do and the mission of the organization in general, and how could people get involved if they want to support or want to do things to uplift the movement there? You know what I mean? And that's what I always appreciate about George. He makes the work that he does, he frames it in the sense of a movement. It's just not an org mission. No, this is a movement. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. So, Courage, Communities United for Restorative Youth Justice, we're on a mission to end youth incarceration and build youth leaders. We think every young person is a blessing and is sacred, and it's completely unacceptable that we would ever take a young person away from their family and their community and put them in a cage. And that is, as a society, that we think of prisons and jails as like anything that's acceptable for any situation like that. We can certainly be more creative, and we would actually have safer communities and healthier communities if we tried to address the root causes, if we tried to understand if there was a harm, if somebody hurt somebody, why did they do that? What's the need that they have, and address that need rather than, traumatizing them even more by incarcerating them. But the reason it's a movement is if we were able to accomplish our mission of ending youth incarceration in California, there's still so many other systems that
Hmm.
create and reproduce harm. And we know that, like, what we really need is a total transformation. We need abolition of like the kind of society that we've created that is originated in and continues to perpetuate genocide and slavery and patriarchy and extractive capitalism that just does so much harm to Mother Earth, so much harm to our bodies, our spirit. It is really the root of all of the problems that we have when we have a planet that and a Mother Nature that is actually abundant, and there's like no reason that anybody should be struggling or hungry or homeless or hurting. And so, yeah, that's going to take a huge movement. So we are constantly organizing. We're working with formerly incarcerated and systems impacted young people, but also adults coming back from incarceration, families who are impacted by incarceration or state violence. And we're training them up to be, to develop leadership and organizing skills. And we work on lots of different campaigns, from very, very local campaigns around our city and county budgets to make sure that we're getting as many resources out of the system of policing and incarceration and into community-based organizations and arts and jobs and the things that we know communities actually need. And, we try to impact policy at the state level. We work with similar organizations, even on a national and international level, whether it's the formerly incarcerated people's movement or Global Grassroots Justice Alliance, GGA, Rising Majority. We're like always in partnerships because we know that like where we're really rooted in Oakland, California, and in the state is where we try to do where we do most of our direct work. But we know that we have relatives everywhere who have made the same assessments, very similar goals, and we need to all be working together if we really want to change things from the bottom up and through and through. So the best way to get involved is to follow our Instagram because we're on Facebook and we have a website, but Instagram is where we're constantly sharing what we're doing, kind of our analysis of what's happening. And this is a really important time because we all know that at the national level, things are going in a terrible direction. But that's also true very locally. Like in our backyard, we worked so hard and we finally had gotten a lot of the policies that we had been fighting for to bring people home, to keep people out of incarceration, to invest in alternatives. And a lot of that is being undone as we speak. And people are, our opposition is really coalescing and joining forces and pouring all of their resources to take things not just backwards, but like even to a place that even this country has never necessarily been in that level of intensity in terms of being anti-life, anti-woman, anti-children. I think, some people are trying to take us to a very, very terrible place, and we have to get involved. We have to figure out there's lots of roles to play. There's lots of organizations, but people really need to link up with an organization and start to get involved and learn some skills and figure out how to be in community because, we might not be on the other side of this in a year or two. We don't know how long it's going to take and how ugly it's going to get. And the only antidote to the evilness and the hopelessness and despair is community and organizing together. That's where it's at, So Courage is doing some really great work, from food justice, food pantries, and mutual aid to, big policy changes. And like I said, a lot of national, international organizing. We always are welcoming people to join us and be in community with us.
Yes, thank you for naming all of that and for the beautiful work that you all do. You mentioned the best way to connect with you all was through Instagram. Did you mention the Instagram handle?
It's Courage 510, CURYJ 510.
All right. And if they wanted to connect specifically with you and focus on the work that you do at Courage, how could they do that or how can they learn more?
Happy to talk to people. I can give out my email. It's easy. F for Frankie, my first name, Ramos @courage.org. And that's my role at the organization is to always be talking to people who are interested in getting plugged in, learning more. So happy to hear from anybody.
Nice. If you wanted to shout out any other orgs that you may be involved in your area, you're also welcome to do that.
Yeah, shout out. We've had a small but mighty group where I cut my teeth in organizing with Puerto Ricans fighting for the independence of Puerto Rico and a lot of our comrades, either North American comrades, but a lot of like Filipinos and Cubanos and Guamanians who are also fighting against U.S. imperialism. And we've always had a small but mighty group out here in the Bay Area that played a critical role in getting the liberation of Puerto Rican political prisoners, getting the U.S. Navy out of Vieques, Puerto Rico. And, we are coming up on a celebration this July. The United States is going to be celebrating 250 years, July 4th. And we're going to be saying, no to no kings, no colonies, free Puerto Rico, free all of our nations. And I'm just really proud of that work because like I said, we're a small group, but mighty, and we're gearing up to do some big things this year.
All right. That's a lot. I've worked with many Puerto Rican independent people throughout the years, Chicago, Denver, different places, and it's always been, it's been a movement that a lot of people sometimes are not aware of. You know what I mean? Like, it was good when they had Bad Bunny at the Super Bowl, because it got people thinking about, like, whoa. I mean, I couldn't believe, I heard people say, is Puerto Rico's an actual territory? What does that mean? Like, it just sounds so archaic, but it's modern day colonialism and imperialism, and the people there deserve their freedom. They deserve their freedom, not just politically, economically as well. You know what I mean? To build with that region. The Caribbean region is blessed with beautiful weather, but it's also blessed with some hardships sometimes because of that. You know what I mean? But politically, they've been bombarded with all kinds of issues. I feel for the people there. I feel for the people in Cuba and the DR and all those locations. You know what I mean? I want to thank you so much, Frankie, for agreeing to talk with us and have this very meaningful conversation about healing. And part of the reason why I wanted you here is I really felt your integrity when we were at the trainings with you. I felt that this is something that you didn't just come to. You had to kind of forge your path in a way. You kind of had to build it as you're living. And, that's something we should all applaud and strengthen and want for all our kids, and our friends and in our community, especially in today's hard times. It really, sometimes it's hard to get people to fight and resist the apathy. Like, oh, things will never change. We don't need to do anything. It's like, no, we can make a better place. I mean, this country, even at 250 years old, is not that old in retrospect when it comes to cultures and civilizations and stuff like that. So I want to tell you, I wish you the best. And anytime you need something, let us know. We got your back. We have another home in Oakland because of our work there, not only with Courage, but with the Brotherhood of Elders and all the different organizations there. Oakland itself, the Bay, it's very unique place, and I always enjoy that. Recharges my batteries.
And you recharge ours when you're in the space, so the feeling is mutual for sure. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Frankie, for your time, for sharing your story, for all the beautiful reminders and the lessons that we also get out of those reminders as well.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, gente. As we end this episode, I want you to think again about healing. A lot of what I heard too was that acknowledgement. We have to think about those steps of acknowledgement. Try to understand what those issues are. Try to integrate those teachings into our everyday life, and then to make a commitment to move on those things. That's how we build healing. It's not easy, but there's a roadmap, and it's very helpful in a lot of different ways. So I just want to share that with each and every one of you. Again, please, if you like our podcast, please share it on your socials, write a review. If you get something positive out of it, and give us a rating. It really helps other people find it. And that's our goal, is how do we spread this message of hope and peace and healing and those things. So with that, palabra.
Palabra.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.